make my welcoming remarks. As Cyprian has said, we at Clean Start are looking to empowering women, girls, and children who are mostly impacted by poverty, lack of economic opportunities, and a lot of stigmatization when they leave the institutions and trying to reintegrate back into society. So for us at Clean Start is to destigmatize and see to it that they reintegrate back into society successfully. Through our Ufunuo program that we run, we have what we call family engagement and other interventions that help to see to it that these women reintegrate back without much stigma from the community. So to kick off my discussion and looking at amplifying the alternatives to the mass incarceration of women and the criminalization of poverty, I'd like to begin by sharing with you some statistics on what's currently happening. Today I was at a conference earlier on where we had that 63, from a study that was done recently, 63% of Kenyans faced a legal issue, which showed very clearly that is about 20 million Kenyans, and this is trying to show why this is an important conversation for you who's not in any way impacted by the criminal justice system. You don't work within the criminal justice system, you're not directly impacted, and you might be asking yourself, why does this concern me? It's because half of our population has a legal issue and needs to go and sort it out within the criminal justice system arms that we have. And from that study, we got to hear that 4.2 million Kenyans were dealing with a matter that was criminal in nature. 81% took the active steps to resolve that issue, which means that they went to a court of law and had to sort it out that way. Now, 35% of justice seekers had a problem with a neighbor or a family member. And this is where it comes closer to those of us who might be wondering, how does this concern me? These are 7 million Kenyans. Now, if the matter that they're dealing with affects and impacts their neighbor or family, that means that when they get back into society, we have to handle and address how they get reintegrated back into the community. How do we get restoration? If it's a neighbor, how do we see to it that they continue living in peace post-imprisonment? Now, the statistic that I want us to really focus on this evening, after painting this picture after painting the bigger picture, I want us to focus on the statistic of 47% of imprisoned women in Kenya who are serving less than 1 year in prison. Now, that's close to half of the women who are imprisoned in this country. They are in for less than a year. So 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, less than a year. And those who serve this kind of a sentence are those who have been sentenced with a petty offense. Yeah. And from what we saw in the video that played earlier, 90% of the women who are in our prisons are mothers, and they are the sole breadwinners of their families. So what this means is that when this woman goes into prison, she leaves her children unattended to. And in most cases, because these are petty offenses, this woman was trying to fend for those very children that she has left all by herself. So even as we look at alternatives to mass incarceration for women, there is an invisible victim. There is an invisible person who is the child who's being left behind. And for some of the children, they accompany their mothers to prison. Now, let me define what a petty offense is, because we will be talking a lot about petty offenses throughout this webinar. These are minor offenses for which the punishment is prescribed by law to carry a warning, a community service, a low value fine, or a short term of imprisonment, often for failure to pay the fine. Examples include loitering, begging, being disorderly, being idle. And this is in a country where we've got very high unemployment rates, which translates to 65% of the imprisoned people being our youth, which is a direct translation of the socioeconomic issues that we have. Other petty offenses are, for example, failure to pay debts, being a nuisance, disobedience to parents, offenses created through bylaws aimed at controlling public nuisances on public roads and in public places, such as urinating in public and washing clothes in public, and laws criminalizing informal commercial activities, such as hawking and vending, which takes a lot of these women into prisons for that less than 1 year. Petty offenses are entrenched in national legislation, and in most countries fall within the broader category of minor offenses, misdemeanors, summary offenses, or regulatory offenses. And these are the stories that we will be listening to most part of this evening. It's women who couldn't pay a debt at that particular moment, ended up being imprisoned, something that could have been handled in an alternative manner. It's a woman who was trying to fend for her children, a social economic issue that could have been dealt with in an alternative way. It's the poor, the vulnerable, the weak amongst us in society. And you know, we can reduce this over-reliance on imprisonment of petty offenders because it's provided for in our law. And some of the ways we could do this is by prevention of the crime. We could also use the diversion strategy that our criminal justice system is really investing in and using. And when you talk about diversion strategy, because I know most of us here don't work within the criminal justice system and have joined in to learn how, as citizens, we could reduce the over-reliance of imprisonment or prosecution of petty offenses. Allow me to explain what the diversion is. It's a process of resolving criminal cases without resort to full judicial proceedings. And diversion can take the form of a simple caution or warning. You could apologize to the victim, pay for the damage done, or it may involve referral to a structured diversion program. We also have restorative justice processes or similar schemes, which enable offenders to be dealt with by non-judicial bodies and thereby avoiding the negative effects of formal judicial proceedings, a criminal conviction and a criminal record. Because once these women go through the criminal justice system all the way to being imprisoned, they then have a criminal record and they cannot get access to a clean certificate of good conduct, which is required in most cases for employment and other meaningful means of livelihood. And then, of course, we have alternatives to keep petty offenders out of prisons. So in the next slide, we'll look at some of these alternatives just to educate ourselves on what they are and what we could apply. In most cases outside court, what happens is that communities will use autonomous mechanisms. And this is where that, where we use, where we involve faith-based organizations. If it's Christians, they'll use church elders, Muslims, the Cathis and so on, or what we used to call the barazas, the small elderly persons community meetings that would resolve the issue. Sometimes the self-help groups, which we call chamas, also help. Other ways are, for example, state-affiliated mechanisms where we can use children officers or CSOs affiliated mechanisms. And in Kenya, we have what we call FIDA, we have what we call Kituo cha Sheria, these kinds of organizations assist with CSOs affiliated mechanisms. Within the court system, and we will be hearing from experts who work in these spaces. We've got the diversion that I've just talked about. We've got plea bargains, withdrawals where the person who has taken the matter to court withdraws it, and then there can be a settlement out of court. We've got alternative sentencing, especially for first-time offenders, petty offenders. They could get alternative sentencing, and then alternative justice systems where we have as well reconciliation. So those are some of the ways that we can deal with these matters without going all the way into court. And I want to end my welcoming remarks and my opening remarks by stating that the power of mercy is that it belongs to the undeserving. Because normally we're very quick to judge. Why did she steal that loaf of bread? Why did she, steal that food? Why did she have to hawk where she was hawking without the license? It's when mercy is least expected that it's most potent. Strong enough to break the cycle of victimization and victimhood, retribution and suffering. And I believe that the true measure of our character is how we treat the poor amongst us, those who are disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. And it is our sincere hope that as you continue to engage with us in this webinar, that we have partnered with Catalyst 2030 to bring and create awareness on alternatives to the mass incarceration of women, that you will learn how we could extend our mercy to those who really need support from us, who are victims of social economic issues. So welcome, and that you will continue to engage in the various ways that we will share. Thank you very much, and back to you, CP.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for those wonderful words. Sure, the power of mercy belongs to the undeserving. And that is powerful, such a powerful statement. Thank you, Teresa, for bringing those facts to life and sharing with us the reality on the ground for those who have been through the criminal justice system. And we are now going to go into our breakout sessions where we'll be able to engage with women who have gone through these real life experiences. And I will kindly request Njambi to please show us or direct us on how the breakout sessions will run. And then we'll come back and converge back and just share our takeaways from that session. Over to you, Njambi.
Thank you, Sipi. Hello, guys. We're about to get into our breakout session. Now, what a breakout session will do, it will give us a more immersive experience by hearing the experiences of women who underwent the criminal justice system from a petty offense angle. We're going to have 3 breakout rooms whereby 3 women, one in each room, is going to tell their experience, and you can have takeaways. And if time allows, you can be able to ask questions. Now, we have only got 15 minutes during this session. So it's going to be a bit rushed. You won't be able to get the entire story, but you will pick your takeaways. And please chat, put your questions, put your takeaways on the chat box. After 15 minutes, you will automatically be returned to the main session. So once I open the main room, you're going to get a box telling you you're going to join a certain group. Just click join, and then you'll be taken automatically there. I'll be in the main session, so anyone who's left in the main session, I will still assign you. All the best.
Thank you so much, everybody. I'm sorry we had a small technical glitch, and I'm sorry if you were affected in any way, and we were able to sort that out. We were able to share our stories, and we've heard from the women. Please share with us some of your takeaways. If there's anyone who wants to share a takeaway, you can share with us right now, or you can share it in the chat box. Even as I welcome, even as I welcome Susan to please take us to the next session. Karibu sana, Susan Kihara.
Okay, thank you so much, Sipi. Maybe first I will just give a reaction. In the room that we were in, we had a story by Celine, and the key things that emerged for me were the themes of resilience, forgiveness, as well as the aspect of having a proper support system that looks into providing trauma and healing care for women who are on transit on the outside throughout their reintegration journey. Also, key things that stood out for me in that story was the aspect of the importance of having legal representation. And then there's also the aspect of, and this will come up, the space or the significance of alternatives to custodial sentencing that would serve, and what sort of outcomes we would be seeing, you know, because at the back of my mind when I was listening to the story, I kept wondering, what if only, you know, Celine had access to whatever, if only Celine had access to diversion, if only Celine had access to, you know, a proper lawyer and legal counsel. So for me, those are the key things that emerge, but I do not want to take up much of this. I would allow someone on the other side, if you are on the other story session, any themes that emerged for you, please share, even as we transition on to the panel session of this particular webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Susan. I will take you up. I have two key things that stood out for us. So the first one is exactly what you have mentioned, lack of legal representation. And even it is not even lack of it. It is there, but it is not being utilized, or rather, the people who have been arrested are not even aware that there is such kind of a service that they can benefit from. So that one calls for us. It's a gap. It's a gap in our court or our criminal justice system, that the legal representation is there, but the people who are supposed to benefit from it are not even aware that it exists. Another thing that stood out for us is there was this consideration of where was the woman at during arrest. When you look at the case of Faith, she was in the shop with her daughter, and the police, without even thinking that this woman has a small child. I mean, I'm taking the mother away from this baby. Where they are at is a shop. So who could be there to take care of that child as we handle the mother? Those considerations were not put into place. So we, as we were sharing, it was really, really painful because the daughter was left on the road. What about if the neighbor was not there to pick that child? What could have happened to Faith's daughter? So those are some of the things that we looked at. some of the things that really needs to a conversation needs to be brought out and be discussed on the best way to handle a mother upon arrest. Could she be given a chance to hand over her child if that child is beyond 0 to 4? Could there be a family member and be asked and be handed over the child so that the woman can go and serve if at all it is a case that requires serving? But if it is a petty offense like this one of a debt, could there be an opportunity of maybe mediation or even an uncustodial sentencing? So those are some of the things and some of the concerns that we realized while we were having our discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah, for that. Just reading a comment by Caroline, where she says that personally for her, her takeaway from the session was that the importance of letting go, as well as the importance of educating others on the same, and also that she points out that we should encourage others to consider the invisible victims, because it seems that the punishment cost to the storyteller was very much. And indeed, there was a question that was raised even in our session on what is the priority support that is needed for children who get affected by the process. Then there's another comment coming in, takeaway by Wairimu is that the law does not help the citizen. A huge gap is being seen in the criminal justice system, and it's the way, one moment. Let me take that again. The comment by Wairimu says that her key takeaway is that the law does not seem to be helping the citizen. There's a huge gap being seen in the criminal justice system of Kenya and the way it is preventing petty crimes, incarceration. And a feedback also, creation of awareness of petty offenses is clearly needed. And a quote by Teresa saying, "Not their crime, yet their sentence," highlighting the plight of the invisible victims for the incarceration of the women. So with those few remarks, keep sending in your comments and your reaction. We encourage live interactions of the same. Allow me to transition on to the next session and to get a sense of the panel. Our panel for today, we brought together key stakeholders or persons who are on the front line and they see in the course of the work the impact firsthand that we are talking about today. Our topic for today, alternatives to the mass incarceration of women, as well as looking at the criminalization of poverty. Allow me to introduce our panelists for the day. We begin with Mr. Gitonga Muranga. Mr. Gitonga Muranga is an advocate in the High Court of Kenya with over 13 years of experience, and he's currently working in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, stationed at the headquarters, where he supports key, he supports key roles within the Executive Office of the DPP. He holds he has experience, a very vast experience in prosecutions, human rights, governance, public policy, as well as public administration. His previous work experience has seen him working for the Institute of Security Studies, ICJ Kenya, COVAL, which is the Coalition on Violence Against Women, as well as Youth Agenda, respectively, on areas of research and advocacy. Welcome, Mr. Gitonga Muranga. Our second panelist for today is Joanne Mutonga, who works as a program officer at the International Justice, at the ICJ Kenya. That stands for International Justice, Human Rights and Justice Program. Her main areas of interest are constitutional law, research, public interest litigation, and has done her pilgrimage at the Fred Muhia and Company Advocates. She holds a bachelor's degree in law from the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, a certificate in spirituality and theology from Tangaza University College, as well as a certificate in counseling and psychology from Amani Counseling Center, and is also an advocate of the Kenya High Court. The third person we have with us would be Damaris Seina. She's a project management officer at the Raoul Wallenberg Institute of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law, and has over 10 years, a decade, working in the criminal justice system, with her interest areas being correctional services in Kenya, but also in the East African region. She has great insights and understanding in international human rights standards as they relate to women offenders, and is driven by the need to continually enhance professionalism, justice, accountability, and rule of the law. Welcome, Damaris. Welcome all. Indeed, as you can see from their bios, we have a very rich team joining us today. And without further much ado, please confirm our first question for the day. We will be asking each one of them to give us their perspective on the criminalization of poverty. What even is the definition of that? And what do you feel would be the mitigations that would be needed to be put in place to address this particular phenomenon? If we could start with you, Mr. Muranga.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I have heard the phrase criminalization of poverty before, and maybe I could start with my understanding of what it means. And what I found that it means is offenses that tend to target the poor. And in this case, you have to ask yourself, there are two scenarios. There's a scenario where you acknowledge that majority of perhaps the citizens in Kenya live below the poverty line, which means any offense literally will be one that will disenfranchise the poor. But you could also look at offenses that typically are associated with people that are below the lower threshold of poverty, who maybe do not have any meaningful job and or any meaningful way of earning a living. And these ones will be affected because, first of all, they will have no community that can be able to support them in terms of getting out of that criminal justice system, but also will have lack of information about how to handle their particular situation. So yes, that's how I would look at it in that sense. And maybe lastly, I would also say offenses that are often maybe likely to be what can you say? Is it no? I don't want to use violated because violated is used in another way. They are likely to breach. Yes, that's the word. They are likely to breach certain laws because of the nature in which they were drafted. And some of these laws, the argument has been made, is that they're either old, archaic, or do not belong in the criminal justice realm. So that's how I would look at it. In my view, my take, before you take it forward, my take would be that, yes, there is room for legal reform.
Indeed, archaic law system inherited from our colonial masters. There's room for us to review on this. I would like to direct my second question to Damaris. Damaris, you can hear me? Welcome. And the question for me is, in your view, what can be done to reduce the number of women who we are seeing being imprisoned for petty offenses? Are there, not that are there are alternatives, of course, to custodial sentencing, but why are we still seeing the number of women going in increasing day by day? Damaris?
Thank you very much, Susan, and the organizers for having us in this very important meeting. Absolutely, a very important question you raise. We have, and the statistics from Teresa were very, important because they paint a picture of what it is we're talking about. So I think for me and how I look at this is for us to look at the alternatives. We have to first be able to look at what are the push factors or what are the causes of these women being in custody in the first place. What are the pathways to crime for women offenders? We have to, I believe, start there to be able to know where we need to go. The stories that have been shared, for instance, talk about some of the push factors that lead women into crime. We had an example of a debt. We know people steal. There was the question, that your earlier question to the earlier speaker, which also talks about poverty and how that leads into crime. So once we identify these push factors, then we will be able to have this conversation as to what can be done, because we do not have, it's not because we don't have alternatives for women offenders or even other offenders. Imprisonment is just one from even the list that Teresa spoke on. It was just one of the many other alternatives, but imprisonment is overutilized. Most of the time it is seen like the only sanction that can be given to offenders. So why is that the situation? Yet we have so many other alternatives that can be awarded to offenders. If someone cannot even afford a fine of 500 shillings, and as a result they serve whatever amount of time in custody, really we have it a bit upside down, I would dare say, because we are not leading anywhere if we're not able to identify this person. Kumbe was a hawker, they were selling things. They only make 100 bob a day, so even giving them 500 bob as a fine is still a challenge, So I feel like the discussion has to be hand in hand with the pathways. What are these driving factors? What are these push factors that are leading our women into contact with the law? And then how do we actually operationalize all these other sanctions that actually are applicable? I like the fact that there are so many alternatives. One of the alternatives that I didn't know about before was the fact that you can even stagger your fine payment, that the court has the power to say, you've been fined 500, maybe you can pay 100 bob a month or whatever the court decides in its wisdom. Yet such sanctions are rarely even thought through. They never come to light because imprisonment seems like the default. It is the default in the system. So there are many alternatives out there that we need to operationalize. Also, not forgetting even the Constitution talks about some of these petty offenses. If an offense can be punished with a sentence of less than 6 months, then they do not need to go into prison. That is what our own Constitution talks about. Yet we find women imprisoned for 1 month, 2 months, even 14 days in custody. So yeah, we really have to look at it more holistically to be able to deal with the underlying issues. And then from there, we will be able to come up with more holistic solutions that cut across the criminal justice continuum. Thank you. I don't know if I've spoken just too much, and yeah, thanks.
No, not at all. Thank you so much for those and those perspectives. And indeed, looking at the pathways of crime, but also what are the push factors. I would love to read some bit of comments that are coming in on some reactions coming in. There's a question being asked of Muranga. Did he say that it is an offense to be poor? Elizabeth is asking, is poverty, is it an offense against the poor? A reaction coming in from Teresa also asked, saying, we need to declassify petty offenses as well as decriminalize offenses that are targeted towards the poor. And she gives an example there of hawking. There's also a comment there that we need to find alternative measures to crimes of survival for women, especially those who are trying to fend for their families. Indeed, the data is showing 90% of these women are the sole breadwinners. Can something be done to get them out? Then there's also a reaction from Cyrus with the appreciation that the law needs to be reformed to decriminalize poverty, stroke-related petty offenses. Prosecutorial discretion is very wide and can partly address the challenge if it is well applied, which is a good segue to my next question to Mr. Muranga. Based on that comment that we've just seen on the chat line, are there any weaknesses that we're seeing in our justice system as regards to the prosecution of petty offenders? And if yes, what are some of the steps that could perhaps be taken to improve on that? Thank you. I'm not so sure whether you got my question. Oh, there you are.
Yes, I got your question.
Okay.
I was putting my camera on. I was advised to do so. I'm hoping that we'll be able to have an opportunity to basically engage and see how we can be able to make a remedial action towards criminal law reform. I will state from the beginning that basically it is very important to always understand the objective of criminal law and also to understand its history. When you understand its history, then you'll always understand why there's always a push and pull and there's always conflict in its enforcement. Then always having at the background that as we move forward, human beings will always want to change the social contract that they have with the state. And in that sense, always want to change as well what they may have wanted or have designated as criminal, and they no longer wish it to be criminal. This is what is called basically dialogue, where citizens dialogue with the state that they have already assigned to manage or to govern on their behalf. That's why we have elections. You know, we assign a government that role to govern on our behalf. Being that said, we acknowledge that we have to continuously look at our laws and see how to amend or tweak them so that they're able to be responsive to the current situation. And as I had said, some of the laws are archaic in the sense that they serve the governance structure of maybe 50, 60 years ago. And and obviously, being that the governance structure 60 plus years ago was disadvantageous to Africans, then you can always see the history behind some of those laws and perhaps the reason why we may need to relook at some of them. But in terms of prosecutions and what we are doing so far to mitigate some of those, the impact that we have with the non-amendment of some of those laws is to improve the criminal justice management of cases, in the sense that before, maybe because we had police prosecutors and the way people just did things, what we call like passing it through a conveyor belt. You do something wrong, you're arrested, you're taken to the station, you're processed, you're taken to court, your matter is heard, the magistrate just passes everything because they have a busy day and they have to go maybe to they have to leave early or they have their own obligations without having that humane aspect that the person you're dealing with is going to be impacted by your decision. To address this, one of the things that we decided to do was to develop the decision to charge guidelines 2019. So what we wanted to do is to change the way people make the decision to charge and also to force investigators or police officers to be able to ensure before they bring a case to court, it meets a certain threshold. And not only does it meet a certain threshold, we prevent them from abusing the criminal system by bringing either frivolous cases or cases that are meant to punish or to force some other alternative reason, which is outside what the criminal law we think should be doing during this day and age. So the decision to charge guidelines is sieves a lot of cases, is intended to ensure that a prosecutor doesn't just accept any case to go to the courts. It allows us also to have room for review in case maybe a mistake was made in the decision to charge, so that we can be able to review that decision and come back. Where a case is brought and we think it can be addressed through an alternative means, or for instance, I'm sure some of you have noticed, saw this meme or this sort of way to ridicule the criminal justice system by showing a charge sheet where somebody was charged for stealing an underwear, I think worth 100 shillings. Obviously, you can see the ridicule it brings to the office. And it was to prevent such a thing. Why will you be charging somebody for stealing an underwear worth 100 shillings? So it brings an embarrassment to the office. And in fact, it's an embarrassment to the prosecutor who signs it. So by the decision to charge, we are putting it squarely on the prosecutor to be accountable for making such a decision. He will be tasked to say how he found that evidence enough to go forward. And even if he found it enough, he'll be put to task as to whether he did analyze and find that that case was best utilized through the criminal justice system, and that it was a good utilization of his time and government time to take to court. So we are changing things by just changing the way we undertake prosecutions and through policy influencing how things work. And if some of you are aware, it's not been easy. It's brought a lot of backlash. It's brought a lot of fighting from what we call system, people who are used to the old way of doing things. Because remember, charging can also be a cash cow to those who have the mandate to arrest. And therefore, we are obviously taking away that aspect that was earlier abused. So there's change. Change is coming. Change has been taking place. And with the new DPP, I think you've seen a lot of policies coming. We are aware that some of these changes will only take place when we have the policy in place. So that even if we have a new DPP who comes in, he comes in when the prosecutor has, his culture has changed, his way of thinking has changed, and the governance structure has changed, and there's a document that we can rely on for the decisions or the way we behave. And that's what we are going for. I will go on also to state other policy documents like the plea bargaining, the diversion policy that was never there before. And all these documents are all intended to ensure that there is no abuse of the criminal justice, specifically in the issue of petty offenses, or what some may call criminalization of poverty. You will also remember there was a time the DPP issued a direction that we should not charge anybody for touting. These are among other policy decisions that we are trying to take place so that we do not, we take this conversation forward. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. And I like you've even given us practical examples of what is happening in the DPP's office, and we wish you all the very best. Continue sending in your feedback. I can see there are questions coming in, and we will be able to address them to the relevant panelists. But for now, let me allow Joanne just to give in. We want to hear her voice. Joanne, I hope you're there. This question is for you. How can we, and by we, I mean the society, the non-state actors such as the media, civil society, NGO, community, and other stakeholders, what do you feel in your view? What role should we play in this whole topic that we were covering on alternatives to mass incarceration of women, as well as decriminalizing poverty? Because the women are with us in our community, so what can we do? Karibu sana, Joanne.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you so much, Madam Teresa, for this initiative. It's quite a noble initiative, and hearing the stories of women and the experiences that they are going through post-imprisonment it honestly creates the urge for us to continue to lobby and advocate for the decriminalization of petty offenses in Kenya. Petty offenses are not actually a challenge that is unique to Kenya. It's a challenge that is unique to many African countries, owing to the fact that these are laws that are an import of the colonialists. So you find, for instance, in Kenya, we were colonized by the British, and they would criminalize offenses. They would criminalize they would have offenses such as being idle and disorderly, being homeless as a criminal offense. And so these offenses were actually introduced to basically subjugate and humiliate Africans. But what is quite surprising is that in those countries, they've actually decriminalized some of these offenses, owing to the fact that they are unjustified and they are problematic when it comes to their enforcement. But we, as the African nations who have been colonized by these people, still retain these laws within our statutes. And in Kenya, for instance, these laws have also been the basis upon which other laws which criminalize poverty have been enacted. For instance, the Public Nuisance Act that was enacted in November by the county government of Nairobi. And we are seeing a similar version of that act being replicated in the county government of Nyeri. So these laws, if we do not take action at this particular stage, then we find that while the country or the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms maybe is focusing on amending the criminal or the penal code, you find that the county assemblies are now still developing laws that provide for criminalization of petty offenses. And so as civil society or stakeholders, then what can we do to change the situation? The Petty Offences campaign is a campaign that I think now has gone into 7 years. So this is a problem that continues to mutate, even from the national level to the county level. So it requires us to develop interventions, not only targeting state actors at the national level, but also at the regional level. At the national level, I think proper engagement with duty bearers, being actors in the criminal justice system, but also lawmakers, both at the National Assembly, at the Senate, and also the county level. I remember some time back, ICJ Kenya embarked on a campaign to promote law reform within the counties, and we engaged legislatures in Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu counties with proposed bills that would decriminalize petty offenses within certain statutes. And surprisingly, up until now, some of these bills have never even been tabled before those assemblies. And so for many members of parliament, there's that appetite of creating laws to sort of have a good reputation or gain a good reputation at the assembly. But then there's very little understanding on sort of lawmaking from a human rights based angle or using a rights-based approach to lawmaking. So you find that county lawmakers and also national lawmakers, they lack the basic, they lack proper understanding of how to develop these laws in line with international standards that guide states on how to ensure that the lawmaking process does not or is not tantamount to abusing the rights of other people that it seeks to serve. So then the other thing is developing, at the national level. At the regional level, there's a lot of advocacy that has gone on at the regional level, including the most notable achievement has been the adoption of the principles and guidelines on decriminalization of petty offenses in Africa. So this is a good guideline that we as stakeholders in this country can use to propel change, and we can use it to inform policy and legislative reform, because it provides regional standards upon which states can rely on when developing laws or coming up with interventions to address challenges that exacerbate poverty within the society. Then we have developing research to inform evidence-based interventions, just as I know a number of organizations are represented in this webinar or in this discussion have conducted research on various areas, and this research has been the basis for informing change. For instance, I'd cite an example where some time back, ICJ Kenya developed a research on the status of poverty and looking at laws and practices as the reason as to why many people are being pushed into poverty, and focusing Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa counties. And on that basis, ICJ Kenya became a member of the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms, providing expert direction on the criminalization of petty offenses. So the other thing is also there's research. I'm aware that CleanStart has already is already working on. So, and also the stories that are being shared on this platform, these are useful tools that can inform change. And I just want to laud Kleinstadt immensely for the work that you're doing, focusing on women and changing the narratives of women and changing their lives. I really, really immensely applaud you for that work. The other thing is providing litigation support to petty offenders. So just as my previous speakers, who are my seniors, have rightfully stated that petty offenders lack legal support. Yes, we have the National Legal Aid Service. National Legal Aid Service 1 is grossly underfunded. And I think it's one of the departments within the justice sector that receives very minimal budgetary allocation, yet the mandate is quite broad, and even access to justice is a constitutional right. And so you find that many petty offenders do not have knowledge about law. They do not have knowledge about their rights. So it's easy for a petty offender who's even arrested, not for a petty offense, or maybe just for refusing to give a bribe. And so you find most of these charges are usually trumped up charges. So a county law enforcement officer or a city askari, as we call them, would come in and request either for a bribe. And so someone would say, I won't give you a bribe. And then these people, they immediately start initiating the process of you getting a charge sheet. And this has been very common, particularly in cases, because we have represented petty offenders. And the last case that we were working on was someone who was arrested for the offense of dumping. But in the real sense, this person did not commit a crime. He refused to give a bribe. So you find that these petty offenses have been the basis for which city askaris have been exercising their powers, and to abuse, to the extent that they abuse the people, because the powers that they have been given under the, for instance, the City Inspectorate Services Act and the mandates that they have been given under the Public Nuisance Act in enforcing that law gives them vague, broad, and discretionary powers, which they often, more often than not, abuse these powers. So providing litigation support to petty offenders is quite critical from the point of arrest. And you'll find that many petty offenders, usually because they fear the court process of being taken to court, they would easily give a bribe. Or for some, they would easily, when they go to court, they just plead guilty because they're scared of going through the whole trial process. So there's still need for us to continue to provide litigation support and create awareness amongst populations that are vulnerable to be arrested or are likely to be arrested for petty offenses. And surprisingly, not only the poor are and vulnerable groups or hawkers, such as hawkers or as what people might call them, street traders, are arrested for petty offenses. You and I, we are also victims, and we are actually potential petty offenders, because you find that many a times people would share their experiences saying that they were just sitting somewhere in town, and then a city askari came in and said that maybe, what are you doing here? Or a police came in and said, you're being idle and disorderly. Or at night when you're walking, some people have shared experiences of being arrested and they're being told that they're loitering. And so each and every, it's not only for the poor people, but it's just that the poor people actually bear the brunt of enforcement of these offenses. So the other thing is to lobby for reforms. Remember that petty offenses do not address the socioeconomic challenges. They do not provide solutions to the challenges that push people to engage in activities that have been criminalized, sort of, or are rendered illegal. For instance, hawking. So why would you arrest someone for hawking? And you find that, for instance, the context in Kenya, there's not enough space for street traders to fit in the trade centers that have been gazetted within the law. So you find that most of these people will actually come within the city center or CBD to look for clients. So instead of coming up with solutions that would address these issues, then you are imprisoning them. Imprisonment has never been a solution to a problem. Where in the context of petty offenses, a person is being alleged to have committed petty offenses. The other thing is to also highlights the plight of petty offenders. This forum has rightfully done that. And once you continue to amplify the voices of victims of enforcement of petty offenders, then you slowly create a movement, because you're creating a need. You're showing people there's a need for these laws to be criminalized. So platforms like this are quite useful to sort of highlight or amplify the challenges that petty offenders face within the criminal justice system. And I would just beg maybe to stop there. And thank you once again for this opportunity. And I must say that thank you, Teresa, for organizing this. And to all the women who have shared their stories, thank you for being bold. And thank you for also actively taking part in this agenda to change the situation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joanne. Indeed, I don't think we need to add anything to what you have said. I can see the reactions that are coming in very fast and furious on the chat. There's consensus and agreement that corruption is a contributing factor to many people ending up sometimes in prison. A reaction from Maureen. Then there's a question being asked by Elizabeth Green. Is impoverishment a crime? Is a man responsible if he impregnates a woman who cannot afford to raise a child? Does the government provide her with a survival strategy that is an alternative to bearing, to feeding, the children? Then there's I wanted to read a comment that came in Swahili by Veronica. Yes, Veronica Ngosewe, and I'll read it and try and translate. She says, mimi ningependa kuwe na njia mbadala ya kutatua makosa madogo madogo kuzuia kupeleka watu jela. Quick translation, she is in agreement and says, if we could come up with alternative means for non-custodial sentencing to ensure that women or people are not being brought into prison due to petty offenses. We could go on and on and on about this. However, allow me to bring this to a closure. And I thank you all for the rich engagements that we have had from this. Round of applause to all our three panelists who really showed up and gave us great insights and topics and shed light on the topic for today, which was alternatives to mass incarceration of women, as well as criminalization of poverty. But before I go, there's one person who I felt should be given a chance just to speak on something to do with mental health. His name is Matthew Mutiso. From the last session that we listened to from the stories, a key element that came up was on the trauma and healing care and the significance of having mental well-being and care for the women after they exit from prison. Matthew, if you're present, please. I'm not so sure if Matthew can hear me. Are you having technical difficulties, Matthew? Okay, I think we seem to be having a bit of challenges connecting with Matthew Mutiso, but once he's able to, he can be able just to give us some bit of comments on mental health care and well-being. But allow me to pass this on the baton to Teresa for her final closing remarks, as well as a vote of thanks. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that incredible panel. It's been such a rich discussion. You know, having the experts who are working on the front lines within the different arms of the criminal justice system here in Kenya. Thank you very much for your time and sharing those insights with us. Really want to thank the women who have vulnerably shared their stories, how they were impacted, shamed, embarrassed, and treated in very difficult manner within the criminal justice system for crimes that we have seen and agreed that would have been handled alternatively. So unfortunately, because of time, we've got to bring this to a wrap, and we'd really love to have your email addresses, as we would love to continue having this conversation. So as I give my closing remarks, what I'd love to say is that we at Clean Start call for the decriminalization of most of these offenses. Oh, Matthew, I see that you've come on. Do you want to give, are you able to speak now, Matthew? We couldn't hear you earlier. Are you able to come on now?
Can you hear me? My internet is
now,
a bit stable. But can you hear
sorry
me?
about that. Yes, we can hear you. Just before I give my closing remarks, you could give us just a few remarks very quickly, Matthew. Welcome.
Thank you, Teresa. Cyprian, I had some 2 slides, maybe you can just share, and then I'll just wrap it up from those ones. Yes, that one. The other one, the green one. There are 2, so that can go through them very fast. As she shares the slide, let me start with this one. One of the things that it has been discovered is that the relationship between crime and mental health, that almost, actually there are 2.
We've lost Matthew. Susan, are we able to get Matthew, or do we just offer the closing remarks? And then we could get to hear from him in our next webinar.
I think continue with your final remarks. We'll schedule him a time when he can actually come and do a webinar on the topic of mental health and well-being and its impact to crime trends. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. We would have really loved to hear from him, because we know very well that most of the people who are in prisons, it's due to mental health related issues, and most of these women are actually victims of sexual, gender-based violence and other issues. And so what we're seeing as a common thread here is victims being treated in a criminal manner, which we really need to bring an end to. It's not their wish. No one opts to be poor, especially when circumstances such as those that we have in most of the African countries don't leave us many options. We know that the rates of unemployment are very high. We know poverty rates are very high, and we know that the cost of living has gone very high as well, and it becomes difficult to make ends meet, and corruption has come up as one of the issues that is contributing towards furthering these social economic issues. And so when we don't give people equal education opportunities, You know, we all know that education is the quality and its supply is not equal for all. Social economic issues, people do not have decent means of livelihood and are pushed further and further towards activities that are criminalized, and all they're doing is trying to fend for themselves and their families. And so at Clean Start, we call on the decriminalization of these offenses, and we push for the empowerment of those who are impacted as opposed to punishing them. The failure to pay a debt is a double sentence. When you're sentenced into prison and when you leave prison, you still have to continue paying that debt. And yet you were separated from your child and the trauma continues and lives on. Loitering, begging, you know, these are offenses that we seriously can deal with alternatively. You know, and our justice system will be richer if we offer alternatives to accused persons before prosecution. Let them know the alternatives they have, you know, as opposed to taking advantage of their vulnerability. Yeah. So having said that, these are some of the quotes we believe in. Poverty deserves compassion, not punishment. Addiction needs treatment, not a jail sentence. Mental illness requires treatment, not a jail sentence. Mental illness requires care, not a cage. Let's decriminalize human pain and invest in people as opposed to institutionalizing them, which is what we're currently doing with the 47% of women behind bars serving sentences of less than a year on petty offenses and misdemeanors. So as we bring this to a close, you know, we will share with you various ways that you could partner with us. And it is our hope here at Clean Start that you will join our plans and efforts to invest more in people, the kind of stories that you have heard today. These are women that we have already invested in and are able to come on here and share their stories. Join our efforts and our plans so that we can invest in hundreds and hundreds of other women out there who need this kind of investment to get out of that vicious cycle of in and out of prisons due to poverty-related cases. Help us to develop strategies and actions for the realization of economic, social, and cultural rights, including where appropriate, poverty alleviation plans and policies, while also ensuring the rights of key populations and vulnerable persons are met. So by donating to the Bailers Project for just $100, which is 10,000 Kenya shillings, we would be able to pay a fine for a woman who is in prison for 3, 4, 5, 6 months due to a petty offense like those that we have discussed here. And she gets reunited back with her children. We are in need of technical support in advocacy, research, and knowledge dissemination. And we're so grateful to have Mr. Muranga, Joanne Mutonga of ICJ as well, who joined in, Damaris, and other key players within the criminal justice system support the work that we do at Clean Start and strengthen our advocacy, our research, and knowledge dissemination. And we look forward to collaborating with many others. And then, of course, be ambassadors. Help us to keep the conversation going by sharing within your networks what you've heard here. We will share this webinar with you so that you could also share with others so that we can continue creating awareness and bringing this to an end. And our hope is that in the next webinar, we will invite more duty bearers and right holders, the decision makers, the policy makers, so that we can take action to these alternatives that we've talked about today. Thank you very much. Please stay in touch. And these are the ways you could get in touch with us at Clean Start. We're at Clean Start on all our social media. We are located in Westlands at School Lane. number 31, and you could Google and get to know more about us at cleanstartkenya.org. Email us at support@cleanstartkenya.org so that we can continue engaging with you. Once again, on behalf of the Clean Start team, our board of directors, all our partners, and most importantly, our constituents, the women you listened to today and the many others across the country and different parts of Africa, we sincerely want to say thank you for creating time to join us and our efforts towards alternatives to mass incarceration for women and the decriminalization of poverty. Asanteni sana. I think people can live at their own pleasure now. And please do continue engaging with us. Time was not on our side to answer all the questions that came through the chat box, but we will see to it that we address the questions that came in through the email addresses that you have shared with us. Hope you've all shared your email addresses so that we can let you know of the next webinar to continue this conversation. Yeah. Asante.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you to everyone. We can live at our own pleasure. Asante.
Thank you. It was a good discussion. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bless you, everyone. The discussion was awesome. Very fruitful discussion. Thank you. Following from all the way from Turkana. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pastor Big Dan. It was just incredible having you. Thank you for creating time all the way from Turkana, feeding the children there.
Thank you.
Well done. Keep up the amazing work you're doing.
Asante.
Bless. Thank you, Elizabeth. Those were amazing contributions from your end.